Congratulations on the purchase of your softener tannin remover system. This system will work in 2 phases. Water will first enter the sediment filter that eliminates any particulate. The tank in your system will soften the water while also removing the tannins. The salt in the brine tank is used to regenerate the media in the combo tank. This video will walk you through the installation process. The system will consist of the following parts: the combination softener and tannin removal tank, the brine tank, a drain line, the pre-filter housing, the sediment filter, a spanner wrench, 2 MNPT fittings, a bypass valve, an electronic tank head, a gasket and lube, a power supply, a mounting bracket with hardware, and a hose clamp. The system is compatible with PVC, copper, and PEX tubing. This installation video will feature a combination of PVC pipes and corrugated water connectors. We will begin the installation by prepping the sediment filter. Remove the top of the tank by unscrewing it. Inside, you will find the gasket and the lube that's required for the next step. There is a groove indented along the top of the housing that will receive the gasket. Go ahead and lay the gasket in place. Apply some of the provided lubricant along the edge of the gasket, and then spread it out to ensure that it's evenly coated. The gasket will then be flipped over and reseated into the groove. Apply the remainder of the lubricant and once again spread it out to ensure that it's evenly coated. The provided sediment filter will now be installed. The opening of the filter will rest on a nipple that's on the inside bottom of the pre-filter housing. Drop the sediment filter into the housing and then make sure that it sits flush. It should sit just below the surface. The lid of the housing has guides that will ensure that the sediment filter properly aligns when you put it back on. Go ahead and replace the lid and then fully tighten it onto the pre-filter housing. PVC nipples will now be installed on the in and the outlet on the top of the housing. To ensure that there are no leaks, plumber's tape will need to be applied to the threads on the PVC nipples before you install them. Thread the PVC nipple in place and fully tighten by hand as tight as possible. Repeat these steps on the opposite side. A pipe wrench or a pair of pliers will now be required to fully tighten the PVC nipples into the housing. The final step in prepping the pre-filter housing is to apply some more plumber's tape onto the threads on the other ends of the PVC nipples. The next steps of this installation will have you tap into the pre-plumb. Please be sure to shut off the water to the home before performing these steps. Also note that it's a recommendation to install a bypass ahead of the system to allow for easy maintenance. Also note that threaded water connectors are being featured in this installation. To ensure the pre-filter mounting bracket is straight, use a level. Then you will indicate where to mount it. You will also want to mount the pre-filter near the incoming water supply. It may be helpful to pre-drill the holes using a 5/32 drill bit. The mounting bracket will then be secured to the top of the pre-filter housing using the provided hardware. The pre-filter can then be mounted. With the pre-filter mounted, you'll now have enough leverage to use a spanner wrench to fully tighten the pre-filter housing onto the lid. Use plumber's tape to prep the threads on the incoming side of the pre-plumb. It is recommended to install a shutoff valve ahead of the softening system. This will allow for easy system maintenance in the future. And please ensure that the valve is fully tightened. Plumber's tape will now be applied to a third PVC nipple. It will then be installed onto the other end of the PVC shutoff valve. Please ensure that the PVC nipple is fully tightened in place. Install a corrugated water connector on the other end of the PVC nipple and ensure it's fully tightened. Locate the connection on the pre-filter that's labeled as in. The corrugated water connector will be connected to that side and fully tightened. You are now ready to prep the tank. Begin by unscrewing the cap. There is a small blue cap on the connection inside the tank that will also need to be removed. The connection inside the tank will align with an opening on the bottom of the electronic head. Please ensure that those align before attempting to screw on the head. Press down on the head and then begin screwing it on in a clockwise rotation. You want to tighten to close a gap between the tank and the head. To ensure it's fully tightened, a blunt-handled tool can be inserted into the ingoing side of the head and use as leverage. The bypass valve can now be installed. Align with the tank connections and press it in place. The connectors have plastic nuts that need to be fully tightened to ensure the bypass is properly seated. The MNPT fittings will now be connected. Press them into the opening and then fully tighten the plastic nuts to secure them in place. The threads on the MNPT fittings will now be prepped with plumber's tape. Rotate the tank so that the connections are now facing back. A second corrugated water connector will be connected to the outgoing side of the pre-filter. Ensure the connection is fully tightened. Before making any connections to the tank, double-check the orientation of the incoming and outgoing sides on the tank head. The corrugated water connector coming from the pre-filter will need to be connected onto the inflowing side of the tank head. Please ensure it's fully tightened. Connect the third corrugated water connector onto the outflowing side of the tank head and ensure it's fully tightened. The other end of the pre-plumb will now need to be prepped using plumber's tape. The corrugated water connector from the outflowing side of the tank head will now be connected to the side of the pre-plumb that leads into the home. Be sure that it's fully tightened. To install the drain line on the tank head, it's easier to remove the cover. It's also easier to remove the drain line connector by removing a blue tab. The drain line connector can be slid off. Slide the provided hose clamp over the provided drain line. The connector you removed has barbed ends. Press them onto the end of the drain line and ensure that they're fully seated. Slip the hose clamp over the connection and fully tighten it. The connector with drain line installed can now be slid back into the tank head. It will then be secured with the blue tab that you removed earlier. Go ahead and temporarily replace the head of the tank. The drain line should also be exiting towards the back. Lead the line to the drain and then trim away the excess. To ensure the tank drain line doesn't come out, 2 pairs of holes can be drilled towards the top of the drain. A pair of zip ties can then be inserted into those holes. Into the pipe will create loops. The drain line can then be threaded inside of them. Tighten the zip ties to secure the drain line in place and trim away the excess. Please ensure that there are no kinks on the drain line. The brine tank can now be introduced, and position it so that the connections are facing the tank. The brine well, which is a white tube inside the tank, will need to be secured. Begin by removing the lid. It has a pair of holes that align with a pair of holes on the wall of the brine tank. The threads from the drain connector will insert into the smaller opening on the brine well. A plastic washer is provided to secure them in place. Hold the washer with one hand and then spin the drain connection with the other hand to thread it. The Regen line from the tank head will now be connected. First insert it into the small opening on the brine tank. You will then insert it into the valve that aligns with the opening and press it in place. The cap can then be replaced on the brine well. The brine tank has an overflow water drain. A drain line can be added to it by pressing one in place. Zip ties can also be used to secure this drain line. Four to 5 bags of salt pellets can then be added into your brine tank. Power the tank head by installing the provided power adapter. It will connect to the far left connection on the bottom side of the tank head. The power supply can then be plugged into an outlet. It is recommended to install a 9-volt battery into the head. It will work as a battery backup in the event of a power loss. You are now ready to test the system. While the water is still shut off to the home, go ahead and open the cold water line on one of your tubs. Before attempting to charge the system, take the spanner wrench and double check to verify that the pre-filter housing is fully tightened. Ensure the shutoff valve leading to your system is in the off position. Set the valves behind the tank head into the bypass position. With the shutoff valve in the off position, go ahead and turn on the water to the home and inspect the shutoff valve for any leaks. If none are detected, go ahead and open the valve. Water will flow through your connections and into the home. Inspect the corrugated connectors and also inspect the pre-filter housing for any leaks. You will also need to inspect the water connectors to the tank and to the home. If no leaks are detected, go ahead and turn off the bypass and allow water to begin flowing through the tank. As the tank fills with water, inspect the connection between the tank and the tank head for any leaks. If any leaks are detected, troubleshoot for any loose connections. Continue to allow the water to run for 10 minutes to flush the system. A smartphone and an app will now be required to set the tank settings. Navigate to your app store and look up Legacy View. Once you locate the app, go ahead and install. Once installed, go ahead and open the app. Select Metered Softener from the device list. Let's begin by setting the time. Go ahead and tap on it. A pop-up prompt will ask you to confirm. To adjust the regen time, simply tap on it. You want the system to regen while nobody is using water. Do note that if your system has more than one electronic head, you will need to stagger the regen times 2 hours apart. If you don't have multiple electronic heads, 2 AM is a good option. Your water hardness will need to be set. If you performed a hard water test, then information will be obtained from that. Once you know your water hardness, you will add the number of tannins in your water to it. For example, if your water hardness is 21 and you have 4 tannins, you would enter 25. Now you will select the menu icon from the upper left-hand corner to gain access to the advanced settings. Tap on the Advanced Settings option. The Regen Day override in the upper right-hand corner will need to be changed. Go ahead and select it and change the value to 14 days. The reserve capacity will now be set. Go ahead and change the value to 10%. Next, you will need to adjust the backwash time. Go ahead and select it and ensure that the value is set to 10 minutes. The brine draw time will now need to be adjusted. Ensure that it's set to 60 minutes. Next, the rapid rinse time will need to be adjusted. Ensure that the value is set to 10 minutes. The next 2 settings will vary depending on the type of system you have. If you have an STR1, please follow these steps. Select the resin grain capacity and ensure the value is set to 30. Next, select the brine refill time and ensure the value is set to 12 minutes. If your system is an STR4, the last 2 settings will be different. Select the resin grain capacity and you will set the value to 45. Select the brine refill time and you will change the value to 16 minutes. The final step will be to force the system to regenerate. However, you should note that the process will take 90 minutes and the water in the home cannot be used during this process. Select the menu icon in the upper left-hand corner, and then you will select Regenerate Now from the list. Select OK from the following screen and the system will regenerate for the next 90 minutes. Once the regeneration cycle is completed, the system is ready to use.